Afterwards, we'll see who all joined this morning. I know that it's a busy time, and if you feel like I do, this is when work gets in the way of personal things that we want to take care of during the holiday time. So thanks for taking a little extra time out. I'm going to be joined later this morning by my colleague, Beth Alonzo, and already having some issues advancing the slide. Maybe I'm too far. There we go. Some of you may know Beth. She and I have similar backgrounds. I've been with ACT, I'm in my 18th year, and Beth joined last winter. Haven't been on board for a year yet. She too has a post-secondary background, was a director of admission at private and public, and she and I now split the state. So when you see the little image up there, that's kind of how we have split the state. I'm work with all the schools and districts in Ohio East and Beth, Ohio West. And then I added one of our colleagues who he is specifically works with our Mosaic SEL program. And Anthony joined us for our fall virtual workshops. And, we'll be planning to meet with educators in Ohio over, the course of the school year, as well as virtually. So you may, if you haven't already met or talked with Anthony, or you have questions about SEL, certainly want to point you in that direction. Now, I do a lot of talking and a lot of sharing of ACT related data, and I know that there tends to be different kind of viewpoints about a college entrance test like the ACT. And given that I'm a 20-year director of admission, has been, I also think about that as one of those lenses, if you will, or one of those uses of the ACT. But for today, I'm hoping that we can put some of that aside and look through some of the other lenses and not just through that college entrance test lens. We definitely have, that is one of the uses, and when states have adopted the ACT, typically it's for more than one reason. For certainly an opportunity to assess an entire cohort of students. And if you go back to the basics with the ACT, it is a curriculum-based assessment and is directly reflected on what the students are being taught during school and what they learn and retain. So I'll be talking a bit about showing some of those resources, some of that support information that tells you more about the student data from the ACT. So certainly last year was not as anyone would have expected, and hopefully people are beginning to bounce back a little bit. But again, when we think about the ACT, it is an opportunity for educators to identify where there may be some gaps in learning. In some cases, when results are dug into, educators have an opportunity to look more closely at their curriculum and instruction and see the parallels, as well as that data being actionable for a variety of reasons, often with students who are in need of intervention in particular academic areas. And as I show you some of the data that is now available and was introduced probably now 6 years ago by ACT, but I'm still encouraging educators to look a little more closely at how they may use that information. Another trusted point of reference is going to be our college readiness benchmarks. And as you can see, the three that I singled out, they mirror the remediation-free scores that ODE had adopted. Now, I don't think it's any surprise, but those remediation-free scores, those college readiness benchmarks from ACT, were first adopted by the Department of Higher Ed. And I'm sure through meetings and things, and the validity behind those, that was when ODE thought that that information would be quite helpful as they're looking at the readiness of students when they graduate from high school. Now, a little bit about those benchmarks, and I won't go into too much detail on the research, but first it's important to realize that ACT is an academic research company, and we have more longitudinal student data than any other company in the US. And part of that has to do with the assessments that we administer at the lower grades, all the way up to the workforce with our WorkKeys. And yes, in Ohio, we have the WorkKeys as an option for high school students that the Department of Ed will provide for students, but also for adults. We definitely have a significant adult population in the workforce that are involved in participating with WorkKeys testing. So the research behind the benchmarks is really a couple steps. First, ACT involved post-secondary institutions from around the country, both 2-year, 4-year, large, small, private, public, and often OSU is among those institutions that participates in a lot of data sharing research. So part one was with those colleges and universities to identify the courses in those core areas that were most commonly enrolled by college freshmen for credit. So looking at, again, the English, which many of us recall when we were in college, English Comp or whatever our college or university called it, the most commonly enrolled course for credit in math, even though a number of students may take calculus or statistics, was college algebra. And then in science, for those students who took a science course for credit as a freshman, college biology was the #1 course there. And then later, a couple years later, we added reading, because reading courses, generally, if a course would have the name reading, it would be a remediation course. So we looked at those heavy intensive reading courses in the social sciences that students would be able to get a sense of what type of volume they would be encountering. So the next part was with those participating post-secondary institutions, they provided ACT grade information for the students who were enrolled in those courses. And from that, ACT did back mapping into the ACT subject courses. And that's where we came up with the 50% chance or higher of earning a B or better in those courses, or a 75% chance of earning a C. Now, generally, every 2 to 3 years, ACT will renew that research. And some of you may recall a number of years ago was the first time we'd actually had done a revision. And the English score stayed the same, the math score stayed the same, the reading went up 1 point to the 22, and the science went down 1 point to 23. So know that it is not just a one and done research study. Some of you have probably seen these posters before. These are our college and career readiness standards, another trusted point of reference related to the ACT. Those college readiness standards really take a score band in each of the subject areas, a 3-point score band, translating it to skills and knowledge. So if you were looking at student scores where they might have a 19 in math, then those score bands leading up to a 19, it indicates what they know, and the next score band is what they're ready to learn next. These college readiness standards can be accessed on ACT's website, besides ordering those posters, and simply even Googling ACT college readiness standards, and you would find these in a printable format as well. And then another resource with those standards is looking at ideas for progress and looking at the alignment with Ohio Learning Standards. It is a matter of course that when ACT is responding to an RFP or RFQ, as was in the case with Ohio some years back before the state-funded testing started, that our research department would do an alignment study with the Ohio standards and how they matched up with Ohio's learning standards. This is one example of that document where I just highlighted even the verbiage that is identical in both the learning standards and the Ohio standards, and the ACT standards as well. So you can see there's significant alignment. We also have a document that, if you're interested in seeing more, that is really digs into that alignment and the crosswalk with those Ohio learning standards. And then another resource that can be found on ACT's website, and this may be old hat for some of you, are the curriculum review worksheets. Now, I always talk about these in a way that it's something that anybody could create in some type of Word document, but we tried to save you the trouble. So these worksheets, they can be found on the website, right where the standards are located. And you'll see all of those standards in the worksheet are numbered. And simply there's 3 questions as educators would go through their data and comparing to the student score ranges, and remember those score bands that align to what standards they learn. So the first question is, when is this located, is this included in our curriculum? At what grade level was it introduced, and at what point do we expect students to demonstrate proficiency? So sometimes that means that if a school or district, if the educators begin to dig through the data and they see that there may be a standard that many students really don't have a sound foundation for, that there may be reason to reintroduce it into the curriculum. I've talked to a number of educators, teachers in English, and that's very common because much of the English portion of the ACT is grammar and sentence structure, and often that is taught through middle school, and so sometimes having the refresher, integrating that into the high school curriculum is helpful. So at this point, I'd like to show a few examples of what is available in terms of data. Many of you have taken a peek over time at your grad class report that historically we have mailed to principals, and I'll come back and talk a little bit about that. But we also have a report that is exclusively reflective of those juniors who test in the spring under the state-funded ACT test. And that's always helpful because when that information comes out, those students are still enrolled there. So it's not like you're looking at past students' data. You actually have students who are still in your buildings and you're still administering instruction too. So when you look at those college readiness benchmarks, this is an example of how that can be conveyed on those profile reports. Now, those profile reports are still being produced, and they have for the last 2 years, but they're not automatically being mailed out because we have migrated 2 years, well, we're going on almost 2.5 years ago to an online reporting portal. But upon request, if somebody would like to have a copy of that emailed, we can certainly do that. But you can see one snippet of the report, and I happen to be showing the sample Ohio report. You'll see the score bands. You'll see the end count of students in each of those subject areas that fell within the score band, what percentage that is of students. So when you look at your own data, whether it's using the online portal, which later this morning, we'll do a little demo and share some sample reports, how you can access that information on an ongoing basis and not be waiting for that end of the year or once a year report. But it might be that you are going to highlight those students who are in the lowest performing score ranges. They would be the students who would be in need of interventions right away. And then as you kind of move your way up. So there I just kind of highlighted both the English and the math. And again, showing what percentage of students would fall in each of those score bands. This, of course, is all Ohio, but you would have this data for your own school and district as well. Now, this is at the bottom of this screenshot. I pulled similar data, a school's data, out of the online reporting tool. So again, just to kind of emphasize that resource, you have that information at your fingertips. And as students test and as tests are scored, you'll have additional data to be looking at in that online portal. So what you might be doing is overlaying that data, perhaps using those curriculum worksheets along with the results of testing for a particular cohort or a grade, and really pinpoint where your students are and where some of your energies and initiatives would be focused to see where you might move that needle, if you will. So let's look at some actual reports. This is a sample of the high school report. It's still available in a PDF form and can be extracted from that online portal. Now, sometimes educators get a little confused because they're thinking, well, what do you mean I'm not getting those printed reports anymore automatically sent? We did get some. Yes, one of the extra deliverables is that we do provide currently a printed copy of the report following junior testing under that state funded. But all other national testing, as well as these results from the state funded, will be added to that portal on an ongoing basis. Now, a couple things I want to point out if you've not ever had an opportunity to look at this closer, and it's going to depend on your role. If you're a school counselor, you're very accustomed to looking at the ACT score report. You've probably heard me talk about it multiple times as well, but I want to point out just a few samples of information on there. First of all, the sequence of the subject tests on the ACT has not changed at all. It is English, math, reading, science, and the optional writing. But what has changed is ACT now 7 years ago introduced some additional scores, a STEM score, an ELA score, for example, text complexity and progress towards career readiness. And when those scores, those additional indicators were introduced, the score report format changed. Because the STEM score, for example, is a factor, an average, if you will, of the math and science, and the ELA, which not all students will have, because not all students will have the optional writing, is a combination of English reading and writing. You'll also notice those circles with the number underneath each of the subjects would indicate that benchmark, if you will, for that individual section. And then where that benchmark is in relation to the student score or score range. This is the part that I like the best. And this was something that ACT had announced a year before ever rolling it out. And really, it would be important to say that the ACT test itself has been very consistent for many, many years. In fact, there's been very little changes, more or less tweaking, if you will, some of the sections. This year, there was a little change with the reading test that some students may encounter where there may be a reading passage, for example, that could have a visual, a graph, a chart, or some type of image that would go along with the passage. But really the bigger changes have been in the reporting and making the reporting and the data more usable, more actionable for educators, for students, and for families to be able to interpret. So when we made the change with the reporting categories, those of you who might have been in education for more than 6 years, let's say, you may recall that in some of the subject areas, ACT had subscores, not in all of the subjects. Those subscores were replaced with reporting categories. So the reporting categories is a drill down to give more accurate reflection of what a student or a group of students, a cohort, would know. So at the top, you'll see with each of the subjects, the subject score overall. And then in the reporting categories, you'll see how many items there were total in each of those reporting categories and how many items the student actually got right. The percent score correlates with those items that they got right, as well as the bar graph. And then again, the check mark in the purple circle indicates in each of those reporting categories if that individual student met the readiness benchmark for that reporting category. In our sample here, you'll see that the student met in all 3 reporting categories. Within English, they met that readiness range. And in reading, you'll see that they met 2 of the 3, for example. Now, the text complexity is not a score, but an indicator, and that's where we'll look at below proficient or above. And for the most part, that is a direct reflection on how the students do on the reading section of the ACT. And then math actually has 8 different reporting categories. And unlike the other 3 subjects, the numbers don't add up. And that's because a test item, can fall in more than one of the reporting categories. Again, same situation. You'll see the score at the top and then the reporting categories. Now, if you can notice the indentation, so for example, under preparing for higher math, there are a total of 35 items, and that's how it's dispersed, the number and quantity, algebra, functions, geometry, and stats and probability. And so you can see how the student did again, based on how many they got right in each of those reporting categories. So that's the individual look. Now, when we look at the aggregate look, I say I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself. I already talked about all these. When we look at the aggregate view, and that's whether you're looking at that PDF profile report, and then we'll show you some samples in online reporting. Again, you'll see a cohort. So the 2 that would be typical, that would be part of that canned PDF report, would be that the data reflective of the juniors who tested under the state funded in the spring. And then the other report would be the final grad class report that is based on the last time a student tested. So as I really am trying to nudge people to look at the online reporting, I personally feel that the old profile reports have 2 drawbacks. One is, as I just said, the reflective of the last time a student tested. Now, if you're looking at roughly just under 2 million students testing in an academic year, in about 90 to 91% of cases, according to research, last is highest. But we also know last is only. So when you start to drill down at the state level, the district level, and the school level, those numbers can change slightly. So those last test dates are very often a more conservative average score for the school. The other drawback is the last test date now across the country is July, which means we have to wait until the July data comes back and those tests are scored, because there are students who actually have already graduated that are still testing in July. Then we take probably a good month to share data with the state agencies across the country. So again, that data is embargoed until October. The second flaw, if you will, or shortfall is it takes longer to see that grad class data if you're waiting for that report. This is an example of the aggregate, looking at each of the reporting categories. So in your school data or district data, you would see a comparison between your, let's say this was junior data, as compared to the state in each of these reporting categories. Again, all available on that online portal. So at a glance, when you're trying to identify, well, where do we want to put our focus? If it weren't for time and resources, sure, there's all kinds of initiatives and additional activities, but guess what? Time and resources are a big deal. So I want to share with you what I call the secret sauce. And this is a document that has been around for a while, but often not well publicized until I'm out there sharing it with educators. And it really helps to make the ACT transparent. So when we looked at those reporting categories, and again, at the student level, when they can hone in on seeing where they're the weakest, where they may want to do a little bit of more prep work, for the educators, the technical manual supplement, unlike many of ACT's manuals, administrative manuals, is a mere 53 pages. And that includes the index at the front and some extra pages in the appendix area. So a very usable document, and probably when it comes to educators digging into this blueprint, probably looking at maybe 10 pages. So let me give you a little bit idea what's in here. And so if you were to want to find this on our website or Google it, you would use the full phrase ACT Technical Manual Supplement. Okay, so let me show you a little bit on the secret sauce. So first of all, in each of the subject areas, it would give a description of what each of those reporting categories include. And so if you're a teacher in one of those disciplines, you can certainly connect with this and have a pretty good idea of what each of these areas mean. Then, really that honing in on, oh my gosh, this tells me where the focus is on the ACT in terms of each of the subject areas. So for example, there's 3 reporting categories, and it just so happens that in English, that conventions of standard English is the area that our students overall perform the lowest on. And I can look at this blueprint and see that makes up of more than 50% of the English section of the ACT. Some educators find this extremely helpful, and you don't have to muddle through a bunch of technical documents to find it. And then you also will see the average number of items in each of the DOK, depth of knowledge levels. There are not level 4 questions, but this is a good way to just look at your curriculum to see if you have a similar distribution of difficulty of items for students to be exposed to in each of the subjects. So there's your English. And then we move to the math. Now, I already said that math with the 8 reporting categories isn't as easy to kind of just narrow it down. But if you look under preparing for higher math, specifically number and quantity, algebra and functions, and then of course geometry, they make up a larger percentage of the test. And some of those standards that are measured there, especially in classes like algebra, tend to be the courses that students did better in. And then again, the depth of knowledge with that as well. Oops, sorry. And then moving on to the reading section, again, more than half of the test just happens to fall into key ideas and details. You can see that distribution of DOK, and then moving on to the science section, interpretation of data. Now, is there always going to be a direct correlation with where the largest number, the most content falls with your performance? Not necessarily, but I took a peek at the Ohio data that would include all of the high schools, and it certainly did follow suit. So I'm often talking about that, again, when you think about the time and the resources or the challenges to have enough of both, and we want to move the needle, where might we what basket might we put those eggs in? And this can be certainly a guide, something to at least take into consideration. Now, this is a resource that has been around for quite some time, and I'll distribute a few of these. And this is the Preparing for the ACT Test. Now, this is a common publication that the guidance counselors would often order for students as one opportunity for preparation. First of all, they're free. They can order them in large quantities. And every year, a retired test is printed, and every 3 years, it is a new retired test. This year, in the 21-22 publication, this happens to be a newly retired test this year. So usually when it's a year before, I will let folks know, hey, if you have any left over from last year, you might want to hold on to them, because then you'll have 2 retired ACT tests. Okay, so it's a great resource for students to prepare. I generally encourage schools, especially related to spring state testing for juniors, doesn't it make sense to minimally put a copy of this in the hands of all of those juniors, and then have a surplus for other students testing, and ideally maybe before Christmas vacation? You know, once the ham's done and presents are opened and maybe they get snowed in and there's no cable for a couple days, hey, who knows? Students might, tend to dip into some of the resources that they have. But this is what I like as far as for the educators, is in the back, there are the answers, which of course is helpful for students. But looking beyond that, there is a key, if you will, for each of those items as to what reporting category the questions actually fall under. So again, when you're looking at where you might put a little more focus as an educator or your school or district, and perhaps a teacher wants to do some bell ringers, or periodically insert a practice item on a subject and focus in on one of those reporting categories, this makes it pretty easy for you to do so. And then another area that I like, and this is kind of one of my encouragements often with English teachers, again, because much of the curriculum that is being tested on English, it may have been a while before the student was immersed in that kind of instruction. And so first and foremost, instructions never change. So it wouldn't be a bad practice that, again, maybe it's the last class day before Christmas break or a long weekend or early dismissal, and you have an alternate schedule, whatever it might be, or you gave a quiz and there's a little extra time. Doesn't matter what subject it is, but pull up a sample list of questions. For English, go through the instructions with the students just to make sure that they understand. There's nothing wrong with doing an out loud kind of, class participation, making sure everybody really does understand the instructions. And then perhaps as a class, go through a passage, answer the questions together, just to make sure students understand that. We also, on our website, we have what is called sample questions. And again, they're retired ACT questions, but what I like most about them is that after the student would answer some questions and see the responses, they can see why a particular letter C was a better answer over the other three. And just simply that analysis can make a world of difference with the students. Perhaps they rushed through it, didn't give it a lot of time, and then it's kind of an awakening, like, oh, now I see what they're asking me. So again, great resources for students. So I look at this as really like a pie, that all these little pieces are related, and how you may use the benchmarks and the standards and the data from the reporting categories in the technical manual supplement, that blueprint information, as well as implementing, some of that preparing for the ACT targeted practice in the back. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention one other piece of ACT data, and that is related to WorkKeys. So when you're preparing students for the next phase of their life after they graduate from high school, college may be part of the picture. Maybe they're already in a job and they're going to pick up, that job is going to transition from a part-time to a full-time position. Many of our students, whether they already have set their sights on being a full-time college freshman a few months after high school graduation, most parents are wanting them, if they haven't already had a job, to try to work in the summer before college, those summers between college years, for spending money, for book money, etc. Although books are pretty expensive these days. So when I think of the WorkKeys, I think of an opportunity for all students to begin to develop in their resume. Many of our students, they go right on, maybe they haven't worked and they go right on to college, and year after year, they might even be taking summer courses, they're immersed in their instruction, and eventually push comes to shove, and they're gonna start applying for jobs, either as a college graduate or somebody who's in between years and so on. And so what a better way for students to begin to kind of rise above the pack, if you will, because every May and June, there are hundreds of thousands of high school graduates looking for jobs. Every May, typically, maybe early June, there are hundreds of thousands of college graduates. And I think of my own son, who graduated from the University of Kentucky, and he didn't work in high school. And, I'll have to say, did a little bit of work in the summers between college, but nothing real significant. So when he was getting ready to graduate from college, like many parents, you didn't really want your kid to be that one that's making their homestead in your basement. And so if you will, gatekeeper step before students formally into the School of Education, Engineering, Business, and so on. And at University of Kentucky, their gatekeeper step was students needed to pass the Microsoft Office certification courses. So here's a kid graduating from college, parents are in debt because of it, and he needs to be able to find a job. Every job application that I saw had a place on the application, most of which are online, for special trainings, certifications, and the like. And being able to put something in the blank, if you will, and making hay of that nationally recognized certification in the cover letter, I truly believe got him some interviews. Then he's on his own and I can't help him anymore. I feel the same way with WorkKeys. WorkKeys, students have the opportunity, and they have a unique opportunity in Ohio because the Department of Ed will pick up the tab and reimburse schools who administer WorkKeys to students. It's not an either or. It's not, oh, they can take ACT or WorkKeys. We're still kind of trying to clarify that for educators. No, both opportunities are there. It's just slightly different with WorkKeys because the state reimburses the schools and career technical centers. So it is open for any student. There's three subjects, if you will, that are part of what we call the NCRC. It wouldn't be ACT if we didn't have another acronym. The Nationally Career Readiness Certificate. It is nationally recognized, it is portable, it is used by a number of employers. Even in our own state, we have a great resource with the Ohio Means Jobs. They actually, under all their job postings, they will list in these three assessments what is either the required or recommended score for a particular job. And although some of those jobs are skilled labor jobs, there are nearly 27,000 jobs that have been profiled by ACT that have particular scores affiliated with them. I can give you an example. A few years ago when we were launching the new version of WorkKeys, updating the items so they were more contemporary to what individuals would experience now in the workplace, there was a career center in Chillicothe that reached out, and they were all anxious to get all set up because they had a company, an international company that had immediate needs for 1,100 plus employees. And one of the application requirements was to take the WorkKeys assessments. We do have some companies who will use WorkKeys, perhaps a certain level for part of the hiring, part of the screening, but also for promotion. A company may have an internal advertisement or promotion of a job that requires the gold level, for example, and individuals would have to score at the gold level. Now, again, not different from the ACT, these assessments test skills and knowledge that students are developing in their school years. And some adults have been away from it for a while and have to kind of, do a little test prep and a little bit of work on their own to kind of refresh their memory in some of those areas. But for example, the applied math. There are level 3 through level 7 questions. Don't ask me what happened to 1 and 2. Apparently they never existed. And a level 3 math course could very likely, or math question could be very likely related to somebody's purchasing something at a store. This is how much it costs. They're given a $20 bill. What would their change be? So some very low level, entry level skills. There could be questions that involve some algebra, but you wouldn't necessarily have a question that would be solving for X, but it may be using some algebraic equation to answer a work-related scenario question. Students, depending on how they do on the WorkKeys, have an opportunity to earn one of the 4 levels of certificates, bronze being the lowest, platinum being the highest. Now, I will tell you, platinum would be similar to students who are scoring in often that 90th percentile on the average. But also, I just was at a school in Southeast Ohio this week, and we were talking about WorkKeys, and one of the individuals had mentioned that a student didn't do so well on the ACT, but took WorkKeys and felt very encouraged and really understood the content and the way questions were formed, and that ended up being a good resource for that individual. Now, will all examinees earn that lowest level of a bronze or higher? Not necessarily. Bronze would be that if a student had an average of 3s across the board on those tests. Remember, 3 is the lowest score that will translate to a certificate. This is an example. This is pulled from the Ohio profile report. And this is not necessarily that's what students, how many students earned a platinum, gold, silver, bronze, or fall need improvement, but it's based on one of those indicator scores that we did a linking study, not a concordance, but a linking study. We have some states that will test all of their high school students, typically junior year, of course, with the ACT, and they also test all of their students with the WorkKeys. So they use that data to arrive at what I will refer to as WorkKeys ready scores. And again, based on that readiness. So that is one of those scores that is on the individual student report, as well as available through that through the online reporting. There is also a curriculum that is aligned with WorkKeys, and you can see those 3 specific courses. There's test prep. It's an online program that is directly related to students, examinees preparing for any or all of the 3 assessments. Now, a little bit different from the ACT is that ODE will reimburse for one set of the 3 assessments. That's really when we talk about taking the ACT, we know it's 4 subjects. When we talk about WorkKeys, the 3. But a difference would be that the WorkKeys, if an examinee did not, maybe they got 4s in 2 of the subjects and a 3 on the other, the 3 is going to be what would determine what level of certificate they've earned. But they know they've only missed it the next level, the silver level, if you will, or the gold level, depending where they fall, by 1 point. So they can just retest that particular subject and not the whole battery. All right, I'm gonna pause. I wanna introduce, because we're gonna bring her up in a little bit. This is Beth Alonzo. Most of our folks are on camera. You can wave. And Beth, as I said at the beginning, she joined the Ohio team that was just me for a while last January. And some of you I know have had contact with Beth. We co-presented our fall workshops, and you'll probably see us at different things together. So, any questions on anything that I've covered thus far? I got to watch my time here to make sure we allow for time for our online reporting demo. Now, I don't know, hopefully that'll work. We'll see how it goes. So one of the challenges is, how do we help our students perform the best on the ACT? And one opportunity could be early exposure. And when I talk about early exposure, I'm not necessarily talking about students at the middle school age or early high school taking the ACT, and I'll tell you why. I've already said that the ACT is curriculum based, and it is not intended for students to take the test before they would have particular curriculum in their classroom setting. And that's where the pre-ACT and the pre-ACT 8-9 come into play. Is these are actually built on the ACT. They are infused with ACT retired test items that would be appropriate and normed for those grade levels. The pre-ACT was introduced first, and actually in response to a number of educators not being very happy when we retired some previous assessments, Explore and Plan. And there were some focus groups and really feedback gleaned from those focus groups as to what educators really wanted, what they really wanted in and an early preparation option for students to expose them to what would be coming junior and or senior year. And so the pre-ACT, although we don't call it pre-ACT 10, was originally developed for students who would be taking the test, the ACT, and 12 to 18 months later. So when you look at those predictor scores and the validity, it would be based on how closely timed those assessments would be. Now, the pre-ACT, we do have some schools that administer the assessment to 9th graders, but I would say the large percentage, likely 10th graders. The pre-ACT 8-9, very similar. In fact, I do have some sample reports as I go through. It might be easier to visualize, and I will ask my lovely assistant here to provide you one of these. I have a sample pre-ACT and a pre-ACT 8-9. You can see initially, besides being infused with the questions or items that are ACT retired items, pause.
Yes, we just have a question that's coming in
Yeah.
Chat. Doug's kind of monitoring it. So it was just talking about how it seems like a lot of the ACT prep materials are geared towards the paper pencil test. Are there any prep materials out there geared towards online testing strategies?
Yes, and I'll briefly mention something now and then I'll go into some other things.
Okay.
And especially if you are looking for an option of a practice ACT online, on the website that was set up for the state testing for juniors, there is actually under preparation for students, there is an online ACT. They just would need to download TestNav software on their computers, which takes minutes. And then also in the My ACT, students can take advantage of a free online test. They can divide it by subjects. They can start and finish over a course of days, weeks, months, or never finish it and score it. And when we come to that, you'll see some of the screenshots. But hang tight and hopefully I got more information for you on that. So you'll see here with the pre-ACT and the ACT, there's certainly report consistency. Probably the biggest difference is you're looking at 4-color compared to 2-color, but laid out the same. Again, the scoring, the reporting categories, and the predictive scores. So even on the pre-ACT 8-9, we provide predictive ACT scores based on the performance on that assessment, as well as on the pre-ACT. The nice thing is the students will get back their test booklet and answer document, and really it only takes roughly 2 weeks for the test to be scored, and they can do their own item analysis. They can see what they got right and wrong. They have ideas for progress, so a very usable resource for students. But not just for students. Of course, they have the opportunity to do the career exploration piece, and they'll get the feedback back on their score report. But for the educators, there are a number of educator reports ranging from the early intervention roster to the item response summary report. Both of those are two reports that during our focus groups, educators indicated they use those readily in the old Explore and Plan, and if we could reinsert those, they would be happy. The item response summary report, a typical way or use that educators use that is they would look at a particular item. I'll give you an example. Item 15, question 15 on English. 60% of the students missed that question. Well over half put the same wrong answer. How some schools have used that information in the past is they will go back and look at what standard or standards are being measured or on that particular test item. And again, kind of going back to that pie I showed you, looking to see, is there enough here to tell us that this might be worth reinserted into the curriculum because it was last formally taught in 7th or 8th grade, for example. Right now, we are in a transition year with pre-ACT. So the pre-ACT assessment today is paper. And the reason is that the majority of students still testing both nationally as well as under state testing and district testing test on paper. So when we talk about that simulated testing experience, then it definitely makes sense to be able to offer that on paper. The first transition point this year is in the winter. We're looking at February right now, was moved back a little bit from December, January. We'll be introducing online reporting for pre-ACT. So this year, the schools and districts that administer pre-ACT or pre-ACT 8-9, they would receive the paper reports, and then come February, unless we're surprised, sometimes they like to not tell us if it's going to be a little sooner, and surprise everyone. But those results will also be on the online portal. And so when we get to that part, and Beth is going to do a live demo and have some intro slides and samples, you know, your wheels should be turning as far as, gosh, that'll be great to be able to measure growth, see where students are now and where they have to evolve to. And it's very helpful and information for parents to be able to see where their sons and daughters are currently in school in terms of looking at that graduation test. We have benchmarks. I already talked about the ACT college readiness benchmarks on the far right. We have benchmarks in each of the subject areas for pre-ACT, whether it's 8th grade, 9th grade, or 10th grade. So again, another piece of the pie, another very usable piece of information to be able to measure where students are today and if they're on target to be college and career ready at the point of graduation. And certainly, the earlier we can see where students are, then the earlier and the more impact educators can make on their success moving forward. There are, on the indicators for the pre-ACT, there will be the opportunity to identify students who are on target, as well as those students who are in need of interventions, or students who are on the cusp, meaning they just are missing benchmark by a point or two. And when you think of those students, low-hanging fruit, it will take very little intervention to get them up to meeting benchmark. And so we tend to always put a lot of emphasis on the students who score the lowest, but don't forget ones that are within reach that you can move along much quicker. And then, as I said, that data is coming to the online portal. You can think of this slide as a teaser as well as a reading eye test, because it is extremely small, but just so you can see what is coming, you'll see how many students tested in a cohort. So if you want to test a group or a class all together, you'll be able to measure and look at that aggregate data, as well as the percentage that are on target, in need of intervention, or exceed those benchmarks. So you may or may not know much about our retesting stats, but every year we kind of dig in to see in our own state. And although I haven't had an opportunity yet because they've moved where that data is housed, this is data from our 2020 grad class, looking at Ohio students only and the impact on retesting. So in the class of 2020, we had just under half of the Ohio students in that grad class took the ACT more than once. The average composite score of students who tested only during that state-funded junior spring test was an average of 17.3 statewide, as compared to their classmates across the state who were in that same grad class that took the test more than once, that retested with an average composite of 23.1. Now on the score scale of the ACT of a 36, a 23.1, that climb is significant and certainly notable. Then I also dug into that data that particular year and looked at our 3 student ethnic groups, our white students, Hispanic, and African American students. And again, that same comparison, looking at the performance of those students across the state who only tested under the state-funded junior year, as compared to their classmates, again, in those cohorts that tested more than once. And again, very impressive retest numbers. So it certainly bodes well for students having the experience of taking the ACT and then learning from that experience. Now, unfortunately, I think what we are seeing, and you probably are, you educators are more aware of this firsthand, but I think there is a sense that many students are holding off and waiting for that first free test, if you will, before they try to experience the ACT again, which isn't necessarily bad. But when procrastination kicks in and maybe some earlier scholarship deadlines, and of course, we all know last year was a nightmare for students because there was minimal to none testing in their area. So I always want folks to know about ACT's other in-school testing program. But before I move to that, one area that we struggle with in Ohio, and that is our students who have financial need and would be fee waiver eligible. And what we have been monitoring in the state of Ohio for a few years now is the number of students who register with a fee waiver and don't end up testing exceeds what those national averages are. And there's a lot of folks that have been doing kind of internal studies and looking at ways where we might be able to impact that. And it's not necessarily that they didn't want to get up on a Saturday. Often, and again, one of the schools I was at yesterday, which is a little more rural, the educators even admitted that some of their students have a very difficult time with transportation. A couple things to know about students who are eligible for fee waivers. They are eligible for 4 fee waivers, generally junior, senior year. So you add the state-funded test and up to 5 free tests. Now, do I recommend a student take the test 5 times? Typically, no. But when I look at those stats, I would be hard-pressed to not think there was merit in students testing more than once. Now, leading into our district, our in-school testing program, which is very similar to the state-funded administration for juniors, where school personnel upload students. It's offered on a school day. We offer dates. The very top, I made it smaller for space reasons. We offer testing in the fall, as well as in the spring. And in the spring, we have paper and online, and starting next fall, online and paper will be an option. Question?
Can a waiver be used by students other than juniors or seniors?
Currently not. We've been getting that question quite a bit because, obviously students want to get that earlier practice. Currently, they're geared for juniors and seniors or seniors. And I don't know if we'll see any change in that. Part of it is, when you think about the PreACT, on one hand, we say that that's a more applicable test for that the typical early high school student. But there are students who are accelerated in their curriculum, and I can see them interested in getting a head start. So not right now, but we do keep surfacing that forward, and sometimes changes happen, they're just a little bit slower. So back to the district in-school testing. In the spring, what we have seen in Ohio is schools and districts that are interested in making it available. They're probably taking full advantage of the state paying for juniors to test, but they might have some sophomores who are accelerated or interested in applying for CCP, want to get a head start, or some seniors who frankly procrastinated and did not have an opportunity to retest. So that may be something that you're interested in. Now, it tends to be luck of the draw if those dates happen to line up with the state testing dates. We don't require schools to have to test juniors and sophomores or seniors on the same test date, but I certainly understand the convenience. And I happen to circle the options that do mirror each other. But if you are interested in hearing a little bit more detail about that, by all means, reach out to Beth or I, and we'll be happy to kind of navigate you through and tell you some of the ins and outs. The nice thing is for families, not only do they not have to give up a Saturday, and you know how we are as adults, there's never enough weekends in our lives. Same would be true of high school students. You know, it could be issues with getting to a test center on Saturday, but so many of our traditional age students are involved in extracurricular activities, whether that be band or athletics, or they're working, or, you know, there's something special. And the ACT is only so many Saturdays, but there's a nice little price break, 30% discount for students who would participate in the in-school testing. Certainly with our district testing, we have some schools and districts that pick up the tab for students, but we have certainly a number who offer it as a choice self-pay option as well. You know, when you're thinking about assessments and you're thinking about how to motivate students, I have heard from time to time that, you know, there may be students that second semester junior year who really have never even thought of college, and it's not really, and that's the only way they view the ACT, and trying to help create this college and career, whether it's a readiness day, whether it's a whole, you know, kind of thinking, but ways to recognize students. And it doesn't necessarily have to be those recognition options that ACT has created. You can edit and change these, how they might meet your needs. Perhaps even recognizing students who have met a benchmark, or they have increased their score in a particular subject area. All of those can really make a big difference. And know that we don't expect you to reinvent the wheel. These resources are available in that toolkit on ACT's website. And then ACT Online Prep, I wanted to mention this before we get into some other things. Online Prep is a school resource. It is an opportunity for students to get more help with their curriculum, with the ACT preparing, and we have schools that actually integrate this into their curriculum, into whether it's a particular course or whether it is going to be just a standalone opportunity where they prepare on their own. Provide students that interactive test prep and that skill building. They have an opportunity to focus on the skills and knowledge. And there's a lot of good reporting for teachers where they can access the usage, if they will. If students are doing some work on their own, they can generate reports, performance reports. They can even correlate it with what those reporting scores are and where they want to put some of their focus. Some have asked, is there enough content there if you wanted to develop an entire course? And the answer is yes. I did a couple samples here where if a typical class period was, let's say, 50 minutes, 36 weeks, 150 hours of instruction. And then even some examples how you can put study plans together and embed in particular subjects. Or, just a school-wide, whether it's bell ringers, whether it's a periodic introduction, a day a week for 20 minutes or once a month, kinds of activities. So all kinds of flexibility for teachers there. And another piece of the pie, if you will. Again, looking at all of those different resources. There's a plethora, if you will, I don't use that word often, of practice questions in each of the disciplines. You can see reading 482 all the way up to 804 sample math questions. And then tests and quizzes that are embedded into the program, and there's over 3,000 items within those tests and quizzes. There is a research report that may be of interest about using ACT prep and score gains, and a quote from one of our researchers really spelling out the minimum amount of time involved with online prep and how it can translate to increased scores or score gains on the ACT. Probably at this point, I don't know if we have to do any kind of maneuvering when we're going to do the online reporting. So we'll do a couple canned screenshots and a little bit of introductory information on online reporting. And then we'll probably have to have a little transition time to move from the PowerPoint to the online live demo. We had no idea how many were going to be in person as compared to online, and it looks like online is where everybody's at, and I get it. There's a lot going on and not having to have that travel time. So before I get into that, let me quickly mention ACT Certified Educator. This is a credentialing program for whether it's school counselors on ACT basics or content teachers that whether to benefit the students in your school or perhaps you do some test prep on your own. This is an opportunity for you to attend some, like I said, maybe something that people are just dabbling, perhaps a school counselor who wants to be more of a generalist in all things kind of strategies and those kinds of skills related to the ACT. And right now, our offerings are virtual. There is an opportunity, I believe they're beginning to dabble in person, but because of a lot of things that have changed in our lives, virtual seems to be the name of the game right now. There's been a lot of flexibility because of things like shortage of substitute teachers. There's not necessarily as many in-service days planned this year and the like. You'll notice that the basics course, the writing and the science are all 9 hours. They are a full day, and then 2 days for the ACT Educator Math, Reading, and English. You can't see this, but it's on the website, and these are the offerings that are scheduled virtually in a variety of areas from mid-January roughly through February. And you can see that there's some Saturdays, there's some evenings, and you can access a schedule or reach out to Beth and I, and we will send you the link to that a little bit easier. At this point, I think, getting to, we'll come back real quick to the test prep. I mentioned on the students' MyACT account, and a MyACT account can be set up whether they're registering for a national test. They just want to do some career or college exploration, but also that's where they would access some of those test prep options that are free or per fee. I like the Beth, she dabbled with this a little bit. You can see her front and center there, where you can start a particular class or test, you can resume, you can then see, reveal the answers, and there's resources that then would give additional help to students related to similar questions, all free. And then we have the Kaplan online courses. Students who are eligible for fee waivers and register for a national test can access the free access the live online courses at no cost. And for some students, that's what works best for them. Giving them a big book or a little book, whatever it might be, where they're having to just do some sample questions may not be their cup of tea, but to know that on Tuesday at 7 o'clock, if I log in, there'll actually be a live instructor there that will be conducting a course for me in test prep. There are some teaser courses that Kaplan ACT will offer throughout the year. These are the next two coming up that can be accessed on our website. And then there's some self-paced courses as well. And for some students that may be more how they work, that they want to do some, spread it out over half a year test prep, periodically do some sample questions, some quizzes, etc. And they can do that on their phone. This is a lists all the different types of test prep. We always encourage school counselors to put a link on their website to make it easier for students to find those resources. So now I get to take a break, and I am going to turn it over to Beth, and she's going to talk a little bit, give an overview of online reporting. And we're not sure if the demo part is going to work because of our situations. Well, we'll see how this goes for timing. We have now, can't see my watch. We have till noon, so we have like 40 minutes.
Okay, the PowerPoint's here, so we were prepared to jump up. As soon as, when I finish the PowerPoint, then we'll see if I can get into the Zoom meeting and go live. So it'll be just 10 minutes, okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Vicki. Thank you, PEEP folks. Hi, Beth, Alonzo. Hopefully, I've met some of you, and I look forward to meeting you in person someday. We'll be back in person someday, won't we? Oh, okay. I don't know if you can see, but I am wearing a holiday mask because it is the season. So this is where I need to stand. Is this where you were standing?
I know, I was all over the place. Sorry.
Some of you remember what it was like to get boxes of paper reports and CDs, and those are going away. We're in 2021, so everything now is online. So that's what we're moving to, and that's what I'll show you in the next, am I on the right? Yes. In the next few minutes, but I just want to give you a quick overview. Profile reports for graduating class 2021, those are out. I'm going to guess that most of you don't have nobody has the old-fashioned paper report. And I'm guessing that most of you don't have the electronic report because I know you have to get those from Vicki or I, and I haven't sent out that many. We're sending those on request. So if you want to see the old-fashioned paper report for your school district, email us and we'll send that out to you. What we're going to do in a minute is online reporting, which means you really don't need to wait for that to see what your class of 2021 did. It's all available to you on online reporting. It's easy to access. You can get down deep, as deeply as you want to dig. For those of you who are data heads, you can get in this and go crazy. For those of you who just need to see a couple items, it's there. You can see for your kids who took the state junior test in the spring, the kids who took Saturday tests, they might not have even told you they were taking the ACT on a Saturday. If you're doing the district testing that Vicki just mentioned, that will be there. And eventually, as Vicki mentioned, the pre-ACT data will also be in online reporting. So much information, and everything on those Score reports will be available to you in online reporting at your fingertips on demand. And it's live, and you can't hurt it. You can't break it, can't ask it to do too much, you can't change anything. It's there, and as you're going through in the spring, in fact, as your juniors are testing in the spring, 3 weeks after they test, you can go into online reporting and see, are any of my kids' scores already there? And maybe some of them will be. So you'll know if you tested 100 students and you see there are 25 scores already done, great. You can follow along, check another 3 weeks. Now you've got 82 scores, check another week or two, there are 100 scores. So you always know how many you're waiting for, how many are coming in. And you can create a report, you can play with it all you want in online reporting, and then you think, this is the perfect report. This has everything I want. Download it into a spreadsheet, play with it all you want on your desk, and you can save it. So when you say 3 weeks after that first test, you've looked into it and you see, oh, I've only got 25 scores, I still need 75. Save that report, name it the perfect test, the perfect report, and then 3 weeks later, go back, just hit the perfect report, and you don't need to recreate it. It's already there, and any new scores that have come in will be in that report for you. You go to this with success through success.act.org. If you, in a minute, I'll ask you to go there with me and I'll walk you through some things. Success.act.org is where you get to a lot of things. You can get to Pearson Access Next that way. So when you are signing up to take one more. Sorry, there we go. So Pearson Access Next, when you're signing up to to choose your dates or to upload your students, you can get there from here. For accommodations requests, you can get there from here. When you're ordering materials, Vicki showed you how to order things, those tests, preparing for the ACT test, you get there from here. At the very top, ACT test scores and reports, that's what takes you to online reporting. Right now, we've got 17, 18, 19, 20, and 2021 is in there. I haven't looked too much to see if there are any actual scores in there yet. Probably so, because your seniors have probably taken some fall tests. This is just a screenshot of what we'll see, and we'll go in this live in a minute, but you can see, you can look at scores, you can look at high school graduation year, you can sort by gender, by test date. Test location is something I'll show you a little bit. That's important because test location doesn't mean where they took it, like in your building. It means, did they take it on a Saturday? Did they take it as part of the state test, the junior? Or did they take it as part of your district testing? Maybe you're doing district testing as a retest for seniors. So test location is an odd name, but it really gives you some good information. You can look at benchmark scores, you can look at individual reporting categories, and I'll take you through all those. The high school reports and student labels can be created through this online reporting. Easy, all you have to do is click on a name and you'll see that report on the left. It will show you how to do labels, and you can get customized lists based on what you need and what you want to see on demand. Just another place that you can sort. You can look by last name, you can look by first name, you can look, if you have ID numbers, a million things almost you can sort on. When you want to display, when you want to print labels, because you still put labels on your transcripts or on your folders in your building, it just says display and print, and there it shows up just like that, print them off. When you want to download the report, go into a PDF or CSV or an Excel file. Most people use Excel because then, especially if you have an Excel specialist or an expert in your building, Excel allows you to play with it, slice and dice once you get it out of this system. We're going to look at roster, which is by student. Summary, which is for your district or your high school building. Data tools are some canned reports. Download Hub is what your folks would use, your EMIS folks would use to upload all this information into your student information system. I talked about test location, so you can see right here, it says test location state. That means you took it as part of the state test with your juniors. Or if it's blank, that means it was a Saturday test. If you were a district tester, you gave it to your seniors on a retest on a Tuesday in your own building, it would say district. So test location is important, might be important for you to know, especially for some of your students who will be taking it more than once. You can see the report that you used to get in paper had a chart like on the top. The online system shows you the exact same thing. We're just doing it horizontally instead of vertically. Remediation free scores. Ohio's remediation free scores in English, math, and reading are the same as ACT's benchmarks. So a benchmark means if you scored an 18 in English, you have a good chance of getting a C or better in English when you get to college. 22, same math, reading, and those are scores that we've looked at colleges when your students have gone to college over years. Colleges send back that information on how students do at the end of the year in each subject. ACT takes all that data and realizes that if you get an 18 in English, you have a good chance of getting a C or better in your first English class in college. So that's why we created those benchmarks, and they happen to be equal in Ohio to the remediation free scores. And that's something that you can find in this online reporting for a class or a student. So you can immediately know if you don't, you can identify who is not meeting benchmarks, who's almost meeting a benchmark, who's far away and needs a lot more intervention. Again, these are what the charts look like, and I'll show you those live. College and career readiness standards, everything that we do is built on the college and career readiness standards. These are key. When I worked in colleges, I used to order these posters for all my admission counselors and my academic advisors, so they knew when they were advising a student, and this student had this test score, exactly what that student could do. The ACT tests what's been taught. So what the ACT tells us is what has your student learned and what can they do. So that's what those benchmarks and readiness standards say. If you score between a 16 and an 18, this is what you should be able to do in math or English or science. So it gives you a really good set of information for your teachers to know this is where my kid needs to be when they're scoring a 15, they need to get to an 18, this is what they should be knowing. That's just an example of, obviously math, what they should know at a certain level, the benchmark readiness. So you can look, and I'll show you some of this, what is the range of students and how many of your students met that. This is on the paper reports that shows you how many of your students, or if your student met the readiness. For your students, this report that your students get, it will tell them exactly how they did in each category. So in math, this student, they got 5 out of 5 in number and quantity, 5 out of 8 in algebra, good for them. Only 2 out of 6 in statistics and probability. That means they maybe need a little bit more work in stats and probability. Maybe they haven't had it yet. Maybe they took this as a sophomore and statistics and probability comes late in your junior year or even early in your senior year. Geometry, 4 out of 8. They're not doing that well in geometry, so they need to work on some geometry skills. So this is on the paper report, and you can see this in online reporting right here. So we're going to show you, I'll show you live exactly how to get to this page so you can see which ones of my students or of my whole class, what percentage of my class met these standards. So when you're making a presentation to administration or to the board or just to one of your academic departments, you can create one of these to say, here's how we're really doing. Of course, your teachers know how they're doing, their kids are doing, But when you're looking in the aggregate to see, well, what areas do we need to focus on, this is a really good tool. I'm skipping this, sorry. I took those out of mine. You can sort in this online reporting, you can sort by ethnicity, you can sort by gender. So again, you can see how many of our students are meeting that remediation-free score by ethnicity. You can look female, male. So again, you know exactly who you need to focus on for intervention, and remediation-free scores aren't just for college. Of course, we talk about college, but any job that students need to get today, whether they're going into a technical field, whether they're going to a community college, they need to be able to have certain skills, and this helps you know. So it's not just about college entrance at all. So again, more benchmark, career and readiness, data, it's all there in online reporting. There are some resources on our video link, on our website, ACT. The best thing to do when you're looking at ACT's website, Vicki might have already said this, is just Google. Just go to Google and say ACT online reporting tutorial. And that's easier than going on our website sometime to find all these tutorials. So I think we're about ready to go live. So this is almost lost you. We're gonna go, give us a moment. We're gonna make a transition so I can get into the Zoom meeting and share my screen. Do I need to bring my computer, or can I use this one?
So let's put your current presentation on, move it down on your flash drive.
Well, no, because this is what I need to get live.
Oh.
That was this. She had it on hers.
I see, okay. Are you able to come over here?
Yep. Do you need my laptop?
Are you be able to sign in on here, or is it something you have local on your computer?
No, I don't know. Yeah. Along with me, do that, because then you can follow along, and I'm going to go slowly so you can do it with me, but definitely now's the time. Go ahead and get into online reporting, success.act.org.
And if you have any questions that of anything that's been covered, this would be a great time to ask while we've got station identification here time. See if there's anything in the chat. And I threw a wrench at Beth when she was going through those slides, and threw some of those other images in there just to say, hey, we talked about this, here's how you can pull that out of online reporting. Beth, you're being a trooper. I didn't know how this would be.
Oh, no, that's okay. We'll see. Okay, can I get rid of that piece? Can I say okay? Okay, can I see my screen now?
So we need to.
Oh, I share screen.
Right, so right now we're sharing that screen.
Okay.
So we'll share screen one. Share.
So it's here. Okay. So I'm in the system now. Okay. Okay. So now, great. I'm going to show you some things, and if you are, if you have questions, put them in the chat, and they'll tell me to go slow or to go over something again. Okay. So you are in online reporting. And this, as I said, we're going to stay with ACT all data. I am in a demo account, so it's going to be a high school that doesn't exist. So we're going to start with summary. Click on summary, and then click my summary results. Now you always have to click on a year. I'm going to click on 2 years. I'm going to click off of 21, 22. And then if you are a high school that has, if you're in a district that has multiple high schools, you'll always have to go like this. And even if you only have one high school, click on the actual high school and then get reports. So here you go. Here's my high school, 2 years of test scores. I'm going to move that. Okay. So now here we are. I've seen 2 years worth of my high schools. I can see I had 4,200 and some students take the test in 1920 and 2,800. I lost half my kids. So over here under options, click on options and go to stats. And just for the sake of ease of seeing on the screen, so it's not so much, I'm going to click off of STEM, writing, and ELA, just to start, just so you can have a better sense of what it looks like. And these are the scores: math, science, English, reading, and composite. Now we talked about those benchmarks, so I'm going to go back to stats. And let's just talk about science. Because my science teachers are driving me crazy and they want to know how their students are doing. So let's talk about science. And down here then, I'm gonna get rid of this. All right, so now we should be good again. So I've got 2 high schools and I'm back at the screen where I started. So I'm going to go to options again. I'm going to go to stats. And I just want to look at science, interpretation of data, science investigation and evaluation of models, inferences, and experimental results, update. Now I'm looking at my aggregate data and just what percentage met or didn't meet in each one of those science areas. And this is hard. I don't particularly like this view. So I'm going to go over here to chart, click on chart. Now it's going to show me in an easier to see format. So I can play if I think, well, it kind of meets, it makes more of greater impact if I click. I just want to see the percentage of students who did not meet in the benchmark in this particular, or the readiness in this particular category, interpretation of data. So I'm going to do the same thing under scientific investigation and evaluation of models, inferences. So there's a percentage of my students in the last 2 years who did not meet. So you can see we dropped a little bit in 2021 in this category. We went up a little bit in this category. So you can do this. This gives you a sense. And if you wanted to see, well, all right, let's Let's look at the positive. Let's look at just met. So what percentage of my students, and maybe that's not so positive, what's the percentage of my students who met the readiness standard in each one of these categories? And you can see there. You can see them both. If you're the kind of person who wants to see both right at a glance, it's right there for you. So this is just science. If I wanted to do this for each individual category, all I have to do is go back. Let's do it for math. Let's take off these in science, because now I just want to look at math. I want to select all, or maybe let's just look at algebra. How many of my kids really did well or not in algebra? So I just clicked on algebra. I just want math and update. So now I can see it here, met and unmet, or I can put it into charts. What's my average score? Oh, that didn't work. So let's go select all. There we go. Just like in science, I can see every single section. So in my algebra, I can see what percent did not meet, what percent met, number and quantity, functions, geometry, how are my students doing over time. I'm only looking at 2 years because we've got so many demo students in this account. It's slow. So you're mostly not going to have 4,000 students in an academic year. So you can look at all 4 years, and I would encourage you to, as many years as you have, so that you can really get a sense of over time, are my students performing? Are they staying even? Are they over or underperforming? We'll go back to, anytime you want to go back to the beginning, just click on the ACT icon and go back. I want to go to summary again. I'm just going to start over. I'm going to look at 2 years. I'm going to go to my district and go to my high school. Get report. Now I want to go to options, stats. I'm going to take off STEM, writing, and ELA, not because they aren't important, but because there's too many things on the screen. Now I'm going to go to disaggregate. So let's look at gender, and let's look at ethnicity. Let's look at just one at a time. Let's do gender. See how my males and females are doing? Is there a difference in each category over time? I can do the same thing. Options, disaggregate, ethnicity, update. Now I can see each one of my categories. How are they doing in each category of the test? Another easy way to do that, you can click on anything that's highlighted on this screen. You can disaggregate by. So I don't maybe have to go over here and remember what did she do. Just click on that and it'll give you the options that you have. Disaggregate by gender. Let's go back and look at roster. This is a student score. I'm just going to do 1 year for Duskwood High School. Get report. Now I have all my students, and unfortunately, all my students are the same. They're all named John Doe. So I can't, it's not as much fun for me to show you things because they all look exactly alike, but I'm going to do a couple things that I think you might be interested in. Some of you, we get calls, Vicki and I get calls in the summer or late spring when you're doing your profile reports. I'm trying to find out how to, what the average test score for my class is. Or I had a student say, I took a test on Saturday and I don't know which ones took Saturday tests. Oh my goodness, how can I take care of them? So again, there's that test location. I'm going to get rid of middle initial and date of birth in this case, again, just to make it be less information for you to have to see on maybe a small screen. And this is why so it'll be a minute. Thank you. All right, and that is. Yeah, I'm still sharing, right? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go back and just do 1 year because 2 year was too much for this particular room. So I'm going to go to roster, student scores. I'm just going to do, let's just do 2021, Duskwood, get report. Test location. Now we can see test location. This John Doe took the test as part of the state testing as a junior, and this John Doe took it on a Saturday. If it's blank, it's a Saturday. If it says state, it was part of your state testing. If it said district, for those of you who do district testing, it would say district. So then you can just click on any one of these things. As I said, you can't hurt it, you can't change anything, you can't delete anything. Just look and see, well, what else would I like to know about? And it's all available to you. Scores, again, do you want to see how they did in STEM? Let's get rid of everything else and just see what were their STEM scores. And that's a combination of math and science. So I want to look at their STEM scores because my STEM folks are interested in how they did in STEM. And if you want to save this report, because I want to save it, because next time I want to go back into it, just say save, and save it as my STEM report. Click save, and then it's going to show up on that front screen. If you want to download it, I'm not going to download it here, but if you wanted to download this report, download Excel and name it. And then it comes out of our system and into yours, and that's where you can manipulate and play and do as many things as you want with this report. The other thing that you can do on that front page is you can see these numbers are highlighted. So John Doe #1 has asked me to print off his score report. Well, here it is. I don't have to print all 2,200. I can just print John Doe #1. So this is the score report that you're used to seeing. And it's just like it is, just like we used to send, except that it's just available. It's available right here for you anytime. You can print off a whole class. you can print off just one. If you want to see everyone's, here's a button here that says roster. That means you can click on roster and it will give you, if you have 100 students in your class, it'll show you all, it'll make available all 100 rosters. Just hit print and print them off if you, for whatever reason, want to print those rosters.
Beth, should we see if anybody has anything in particular they'd like you to show in the last couple minutes we have?
Yes. Any question? Is there anything you want? I started to show you, for those of you who want to know, I need to get the average ACT for my profile report. That's a common question. Let me show you how to do that. So you're in roster. We'll start over. We're in roster. We click on student score. And now we would click on all 4 years. My high school, because you're looking for your average ACT for a graduating class, and some of these kids might have taken the ACT during their sophomore year. They certainly took it during their senior year, so you don't want to look at just the 2021 because that's the year the students took the test. It's not the year, it doesn't mean that everybody took it. So you want to look at all 4 years, get report. Now you've got everybody who took it in your high school for the last 4 years, the latest being 21. Now you're going to go to options and then go to search and click on this little arrow down and go down a little bit and you'll see year of high school graduation. This is important. Year of graduation over here equal to 2021. Click add. Now I'm looking at 4 years, but I only want to see those kids who graduated in 21. Click report. Now I've got everyone who graduated in 2021, when they took the test and what scores they got. Now you can download this into an Excel spreadsheet and get it on your own computer. Then you have all of your seniors, everyone who graduated in 2021, you can look through and take out, if you have an Excel person in your building, you can take out the duplicates, take out and only look at the highest score and then Excel can do the math for you and you can come up with an average ACT. That's one that we are often asked, how can I see the average ACT? Has anybody come up with one that they want to see? All right, I'm going to show you the benchmarks. We showed you the remediation free. The download hub is, again, something that your EMIS coordinator would want to do. Data tools is, just some charts and graphs. You're going to spend most of your time in roster and summary. If you want to look and see under your summary, just click on math readiness, click on 1 year, click on your high school, get report, and it shows you for that 1 year. You don't have to go through all the things that I showed you. So there are some kind of canned reports ready for you that you can try. And again, this is something that has so much data. You can see so many things. All you have to do is get in and poke around. I want to get out of that. Poke around and look at all the different options, things you can sort for, things you can disaggregate on. If you want to see how many students, for example, filter here, how many students took it. If you want to look at your ethnicity, you can look at the students. Here's a good one. You want to look at the students who say they want to go on and get a professional degree. They want to get a PhD. And how many students said that? And what are that's not going to work. How many students plan to go to college and then go back and look at them and here you say you plan to go to college, but you only have a 14 in English. So we need to work on your English skills. in order for you to be prepared. So that's the kind of thing that you can do. You have to get in here and play with it a little bit. And again, you can't mess it up. You can't break it. You can't change anything. You can't delete anything. But spend some time in this online reporting, and you'll absolutely find, I don't need those paper reports. I don't need those CDs. I'm glad they're not sending me those CDs anymore. I can do everything I need to do in online reporting, which is a good thing, since my computer, I have a house full of CDs and I don't have any way to play them. My car doesn't have a CD player. My computer doesn't have a CD player option. And so we're not sending them anymore. So we're putting everything out here. You can look over time once we get our pre-ACT. Vicki mentioned that the pre-ACT scores. So you might be a scorer who uses 8, 9, and then you do pre-ACT again in 10. And then of course you're doing the state testing your junior year. And maybe you do retesting for your seniors in the senior year. I have a school right now who's going to retest their seniors in the spring because they just weren't satisfied. It's a small school. So they're going to do district testing in the spring for their seniors. Then you can get into this online reporting and look at those same students who did a pre-ACT in 8th grade, they did a pre-ACT in 10th grade, they did the junior year test, they did a senior year test, and see, are they progressing? Are they flat? If they go down a point occasionally, it's not a crisis, but are we getting them to where they need to be? And this provides you the opportunity to do that. So we're at noon, just about. Vicki, is there something that happens now that we need to?
We don't have any last questions, I don't think. I don't know if anybody that's in this morning is returning for our kind of state testing refresher, but there's an hour break and we'll be resuming at 1 for a very informal state testing refresher. So if you're new or you just need, somebody to kind of remind you of a few steps or deadlines, feel free to join us at 1 o'clock. We appreciate you taking time out this morning and bearing with us. We haven't had a lot of experience with being on like a roaming camera, so thanks I think I fidgeted a whole lot. Have a good morning, thank you. Or good afternoon, I guess.